Hey everybody, welcome to The Office Field Guide. My name's Chris and I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever. Today we are looking at the 16th episode of the third season of The Office, which is entitled Business School. Okay, and I just have to jump right in because there's so much to talk about in this episode. Business School was written by Brent Forrester, who also directed the Merger episode. Look for that to come up later. And this one was directed by Joss Whedon. Yep, that Joss Whedon. So we have so much more to talk about there. And Business School was released on February 15th, 2007, was viewed by 8.8 million people, and currently has an 8.9 out of 10 on IMDb. So your business school trivia is, name the 4 candy bars that are listed in this episode. And as always, look out for the Prism Mic or the Floating Sumo Andy somewhere in this episode. Be the first to get the trivia right in the comments and the first to find the timestamp of the hidden Easter egg, and you'll get your name in next week's video. Congrats to these folks for being first last week, but with that, let's go to school.
No one asked you anything ever?
Okay, the first thing I have to talk about is Joss Whedon's involvement in this episode. I'm a big old nerd and watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel when I was in high school and into college. He had his hands in a lot of things that I loved through the 2000s, but holy crap, shut the front door when the Avengers came out. It blew my mind. When you see his name linked to anything in this episode, it might be an easy connection that he really wanted to invoke the vampire plotline into this episode. And while in interviews, Whedon praised the Office creators for allowing him to have some creative freedom and input while directing the business school episode. He originally thought the script they sent him was a joke. According to BJ Novak, they had to actually convince him it wasn't a joke, and the vampire plotline just happened to be a coincidence. Also, this week while I was writing this, I was thinking about how John Krasinski was considered for the Captain America role, which would have made the Avengers an Office reunion of sorts.
I am in history!
Okay, and to organize my thoughts on this episode, I thought the best way to do it would be similar to my dinner party episode, where I'll just break this episode down into 4 different segments. We're gonna start with the setup. Okay, I've said it before and I'll say it again until season 7, episode 22, but Steve Carell portraying Michael Scott is a national treasure. Anytime Michael's excited about something, it fills me with joy and the slightest bit of dread. But there's some depth in Michael's character in this episode, and I have to praise the writing team for that. And the car ride with Michael and Ryan is amazing. Choosing to film this from the center of the back seat, showing that Ryan is feeling one thing and Michael's in a whole nother place, is simple, great cinematography. Keeping in mind that this is how they typically filmed the car scenes up to this point. And while we're talking about some technical things, there is some elegance in the way that the love triangle bits were shot and edited in this episode. Pam uses these words.
I think it shows maturity. Maturity and dignity.
Who is she convincing? Well, I read this as she's trying to convince herself. I think this whole thing is intended to be read as Pam is with Roy for the same reason that Jim is with Karen, so that they don't have to be alone and they can save face. Hard cut from the lovey-dovey directly to Jim yawning. Following with what we heard in the Ben Franklin episode, Jim and Karen are probably still up late arguing about the relationship. And using Stanley's advice,
and this time really listen to the pauses.
We need to watch this clip again.
Pam's with Roy. I'm with Karen. And Brangelina is with Frangelina. Moving on.
It's the silence you gotta listen for. And I wanna say that's all there is to the Jim, Karen, Pam plot lines in this, but we do get this deleted scene in which we get a little bit of an understanding as to why Jim wasn't even there in the first place. So probably the reason that Jim doesn't show up to the art show is because Karen wasn't having it. And jumping forward here a little bit, we start to see that Pam is already starting to get that she doesn't belong with Roy. Again.
Your art was the prettiest art of all the art.
I've always loved that line because it's delivered so sweetly. It's not just how David Denman said it, it's the lack of depth that's there. And still in the setup, Pam's drawing a tape dispenser, and I feel like it's so mundane, but it's such a good sketch. Then we get to see 2 out of 3 of Dwight's core character traits coming through in this episode. Investigator, farmer, and salesman. And then boom, Bat's released, tons of stuff has happened, and we're not even 5 minutes into this episode. So let's take a look at Michael's presentation. I feel like Ryan's in a tough place here, as he's not actually wrong with this assessment.
I'd be stupid not to do it, right?
But setting up Michael to take such hard questions without any prep is a pretty low thing to do. But Michael doesn't disappoint.
I know these are expensive, but the lesson is priceless. Good.
Michael trying to teach these MBA students basic things about business reminds me that for years I was in this program where I would go to schools and teach business or economics to third graders, and I've used candy bar stuff like this to try to hold their attention. But it's so cringy the way he's talking down to them. As the school section ends, we get to see this awkward ride home where Ryan tries to save face, but Michael tells him to clear his desk. We think he's firing him, but Michael says one of my favorite lines in the entire series.
Good manager doesn't fire people, he hires people and inspires people. People, right?
But moving on to the bat attack. We get some of the best Rainn Wilson has to offer in this episode when Dwight's confronted with the problem of catching the bat and dealing with Jim's vampirism. Vampirism? Did I say that right? I want to say that the most unbelievable thing that happens in this episode is that Dwight would believe that a vampiric germ exists.
I don't have a lot of experience with vampires, but I have hunted werewolves. I shot one once, but by the time I got to it, it had turned back into my neighbor's dog.
But I guess there is precedence for Dwight's belief in the supernatural.
Are you serious?
Ever since I was a little kid, like 8 or 9, I could sort of control things with my mind.
I don't believe you. Continue.
Dwight and literally everybody in this episode is 100% of their character. Kelly is no exception. She is 100% shallow.
We have such a solid foundation, you know?
Oh my God, you're so in love now?
Yeah.
And then I love the bit with the bat.
Don't hurt that bat, Creed. It's a living thing with... Kill it! Kill it! Kill it!
I am a hero.
And then to Pam's art show. Pam explaining her art to some rando older lady. Well, I don't know about you, but explaining your own art is cringy. Art is meant for others to interpret, and that's the difference between Roy's fluff.
I mean, I looked at all of them.
Yeah, I'll drive myself home.
And Michael's commentary.
Look at this one. Wow. You nailed it.
Michael, beaten, bruised, tired, and against all expectations, shares this moment with Pam.
I'm really proud of you.
We do get to see this clip of Pam's art being critiqued by Gil.
Courage, okay, and honesty.
Well, those aren't Pam's strong points.
Yeah, exactly. That's why this is motel art.
Okay, and I actually got a chance to catch up with Tom Chick, the guy who plays Gil, a few weeks ago. His camera wasn't working on Skype, so it's just audio only, so stick with me. I'll throw the whole edited down interview out in a few days, but for now, I just wanted to share this story of Gil trying to get through this scene with some great feedback from Joss Whedon.
When I show up and he's directing that episode, I was like, oh, cool, that's like the Buffy Serenity Firefly guy. And I remember doing the lines and Joss Whedon coming over afterwards. And a lot of times when you have a small part like mine, the director doesn't say anything. You know, you just say your part. Maybe the director talks to some of the leads and you move on. But I remember he came over to talk to me and I'm thinking, oh, cool, Joss Whedon is going to say something to me. And I don't remember specifically what he said, but I remember the gist of it being that I wasn't doing the line the way that he wanted and to try it a different way. So that's cool. Like, I'm always happy to do that. So we shot again and I tried it a different way. And I don't remember what adjustment I made, but I tried to do something differently. And then he came over again afterwards. It's like, wow, he's being super interactive with me. And he, again, wanted me to do something different. And my takeaway from this second approach from him was, oh, he wants me to make it funny, like a joke. So I was like, okay, well, let me see if I can sell that. So we did the scene again. So we tried a third time, and Joss Whedon comes over to me again. So I remember saying to him something that you should never say to a director. You never ask someone, just tell me how to say the line, because that is your job, is to come up with how to say the line. And that's called, like, you never ask someone for a line reading. Here I am. It's the third take we've done. We're going to do it a fourth time. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, I cannot be Nathan Fillion for this guy. He's used to working with the Nathan Fillions. I'm not that. So I remember saying to Joss Whedon, you can give me a line reading if you want. And just this look of disappointment on his face and realizing that was the complete wrong thing to say. And he didn't too. He demurred. He was like, well, no, I don't know what to tell you. And we did it a fourth time. And I guess I don't know if he finally got what he wanted, but I personally disappointed Joss Whedon. And I remember as the words were leaving my mouth, realizing this is probably the wrong thing to say. And then the look on his face just confirming, yeah, you should not have asked Joss Whedon for a line reading.
Which I just loved hearing about, but as we had a chance to discuss earlier in the interview, Tom wasn't a fan of The Office at all. So it's incredible to me that he really, even up to that moment, didn't realize the impact his lines were having on the character of Pam.
And those are the words that I think end up spurring character growth in Pam over the rest of that season, and kind of moving forward for the rest of the arc for her in the series.
Well, that's really cool, Chris. Like, I didn't, because again, not having the context for it, I'm not sure that I appreciated that. It's not just the guys applying like art critic standards to an art student. He's criticizing her for being safe.
Okay, with so many good things in this episode, we just need to dive into the deeper meaning.
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
Okay, I'm gonna say that the deeper meaning of this episode is that the way that we view ourselves doesn't always match up with reality, and that sometimes we need external influences to be able to see ourselves for who we truly are, or in other words, education. Michael thinks he's God's gift to these business school students, like he's trying to teach them everything they're going to need to know in 15 minutes or whatever he's allowed. In reality, these students are just biding their time to pick Michael's brain for why he's not concerned about working for a company that doesn't have any plans to evolve with the times. Okay, personal story time. This reminds me of a time I had an interview with a company that has DVD kiosks all over the place where you can rent movies. I won't name the company, but you might be able to figure it out. About 7 years ago, I interviewed with them, and I asked every person who interviewed me, what are the company's plans to stay relevant with technology as everything evolves, specifically streaming? Most people that interviewed me had some cushy answers like, we're looking at the technology from every angle. But this one guy was like, nothing. We're doing nothing. DVDs are here to stay for forever.
He doesn't know anything, and neither do you.
I left that day feeling like a Ryan, like I knew better than them. But hey, they're still around. They're not a publicly traded company, so I don't really know how well they're doing. I just know I shouldn't have been so cocky. Business is really nuanced, but there is a depth in the nuance of Michael's character in this episode. As he's really knocked off his high horse, Michael delivers this one back to these students.
Dunder Mifflin is the big picture. Can't you understand that? No, you can't. You're too young.
Again, teaching them something about themselves. While it's a little cringy to watch Michael throw Ryan under the bus in front of his peers, it's a reminder that Ryan can give a slick presentation, but he hasn't even completed one sale. So for Michael, this experience brings out what he really believes, that his personal relationships with the people in his employ are what really matter, and that it leads to this incredibly touching moment.
I'm really proud of you.
Ryan, on the other hand, seems to have learned, albeit temporarily, some humility from this whole experience. But we get to see this the most with Pam. Pam pursuing the crafting of her skills at the art school and places her art in an art show called Artist for Art. For real, that's what it's called. In art, you get a chance to put yourself out there. When no one shows except Roy, who it's clear he's only there to earn points, Pam's left realizing that the people she thinks she's close to aren't even there to see who she really is. But is that really the case? Do they really not care? Again, we get to see this pivotal moment.
Meaning real art takes courage, okay, and honesty.
Well, those aren't Pam's strong points.
Yeah, exactly. That's why this is motel art.
Gil sums up why this really is, and why people don't see Pam for who she really is. It's because she's guarded, insecure, and playing it safe is her status quo. Gil argues that art comes from a place of life and experience, which interestingly is the same argument that Michael makes. So bizarrely, we see that Ryan and Pam are in the same boat here. So the message here is that we all need to be schooled. See what I did there? That's the name of the... Sometimes education is people telling you the hard things about yourself to see yourself as you really are. Humans tend to run from this type of conflict as it sucks to hear this kind of stuff about yourself. And while you don't need every message that everyone ever speaks to you to cut you down to the heart, sometimes the right things said by the right people can actually bring about an awesome change.
I've decided that I'm going to be more honest. I'm gonna start telling people what I want directly.
Or I don't know, maybe this whole episode exists to set up why this prop hangs on the wall for the rest of the series.
And then I gotta get him to the Dundees.
Okay, so the School of Business Dundee goes to Michael Scott. I made an edit, I'll put a link in the description. This episode is just too long for me to add it in, but there are some great Michael Scott tidbits of wisdom in this episode and in The Office in general. And for your second Dundee, it goes to Tom Chick. Thanks again for the interview, Tom. Remember to look out for that full interview soon. I'll give a special shout out to Toy Insanity for the hot tip on interviewing Tom Chick. With that, let's rate this one.
What gives you the right?
Alright, I'm gonna give this cold opening a 2 out of 5. It doesn't hit much on my criteria for being an excellent cold opening. The points it does get is for being an outstanding setup for this episode. And speaking of this episode, I give this one the fabled 5 out of 5. That's 2 in a row. Just like last week, this episode is just so good. It's definitely on my list of the best episodes of The Office. The Jim Dwight moments are excellent. The business school sequence is not only a callback to The Office UK, but it's just so well done. And this moment with Pam and Michael at the end is fantastic. I'm serious, I watched this episode a few times and I teared up during the sequence every single time. So this one gets my stamp of approval as one of the greatest of the series, 5 out of 5. But that's just what I think about Business School. What do you think about this episode? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget the trivia and the Easter egg timestamp. If you're still with me, thank you so much for watching. Consider liking this video, sharing it, subscribing if you're not, do all that stuff. Next week, we're going to be looking at the cocktails episode. So thank you so much for watching. And with that, I'll see you next week.